A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. Brothers and sisters, if I preach the gospel, this is no reason for me to boast, for an obligation has been imposed on me, and woe to me if I do not preach it. If I do so willingly, I have a recompense. But if unwilling, then I have been entrusted with the stewardship. What then is my recompense? That when I preach, I offer the gospel free of charge, so as not to make full use of my right in the gospel. Although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. I have become all things to all, to save at least some. All this I do for the sake of the gospel, so that I too may have a share in it. Do you not know that the runners in the stadium all run in the race, but only one wins the prize? Run so as to win. Every athlete exercises discipline in every way. They do it to win a perishable crown, but we an imperishable one. Thus I do not run aimlessly. I do not fight as if I were shadowboxing. No, I drive my body and train it, for fear that, after having preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Responsorial Psalm. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord, mighty God.
How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord, mighty God.
My soul yearns and pines for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God.
Lord,
even the sparrow finds a home and the swallow a nest in which she puts her young. Your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God.
how lovely is your dwelling place, Lord, mighty God.
Blessed are they who dwell in your house. Continually they praise you. Blessed the men whose strength you are. Their hearts are set upon the pilgrimage.
How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord, mighty God.
For a sun and a shield is the Lord God. Grace and glory he bestows. The Lord withholds no good thing from those who walk in sincerity.
How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord, mighty God. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. Jesus told his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into a pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother, "Brother, let me remove that splinter from your eye," when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? Hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first. Then you will see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother's eye. The Gospel of the Lord. St. Paul lays it out pretty clearly. If he preaches willingly, he has a recompense, but the recompense is not to get anything. If he preaches unwillingly, he's still under an obligation nevertheless. So he can say either way, woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. So he is energetic, he is inspired, he is going to preach. We have some of the passage here cut out, I guess, for the sake of time. But Paul says, look, to the Jews I became a Jew to win over the Jews. To the Greeks I became a Greek to win over the Greek. To those who were poor, I became poor. I've become all things to all people, so that by any means possible I might save at least some. Wow. So there's his motivation for going from place to place, preaching the good news. Preaching the good news. That's the kind of the hallmark, you might say, I think, of the last 2 or 3 of our popes. Certainly the new evangelization was something that was begun in concept anyhow with Pope John Paul II. Certainly is carried on enthusiastically right now with Pope Francis. And so we're being challenged to be people who bring the good news of the gospel. In a couple of weeks, I'll be doing the adult religious ed session on chapter 3 of Evangelii Gaudium, which is about preaching. And yeah, there's a section on there about liturgical preaching, about the homily, but far more important and far larger in its context is how we preach the gospel in the world. How do we do it? So that's something that we'll be exploring in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, I offer you this one thought. It's very, very common among some circles to say, well, once saved, always saved, because if you believe in your heart and you confess with your lips, you're saved, right? So no problem. Wrong. Wrong. And what we have today in the gospel, in the first reading rather, shows us that wrongness. Of all people who could say that they confess with their lips and believe in their heart, it's St. Paul, right? Yet, here he is saying, I drive my body and train it for fear that having preached to others, I myself should be disqualified. So he understands that the idea of believing in your heart and confessing with your lips is not a once-for-all time thing. It's an ongoing daily thing that has to be lived. He says as much in chapter 15 of this letter when he says, here's the gospel I preach to. You're being saved by it right now if you remain faithful in it. Okay? So this is why we understand the principle of the whole canon is terribly important. We can't pull one verse out and say, well, here's the summary of absolutely everything, okay? We must take all of the writings and balance them together and come to the understanding that if we confess with our lips, if we believe in our heart, yes, we'll be saved. If the belief in the heart is translated daily into lived faith. So there's our challenge today. For our lived faith not only to be something that can save us, but will inspire and be a way of preaching the gospel to others. Let us stand and pray.